Some of you know that preparation for the homily, I read about a dozen different sources about the scriptures and ideas, and about half of them this week said, the whole issue of marriage is so hot, don't even talk about it. Talk about the second reading, about the sufferings of Christ. That's a lot easier. Well, I'm going to ignore that one. But the first reading and the gospel, especially the first reading, just calls that I tell you the good old story about Adam in the Garden of Eden, and he's all alone, and he's kind of walking around depressed, kind of kicking dust. And God said, what's the problem? And Adam said, I'm so lonely. Well, God said, I got this great idea. I'm going to make a companion for you, a woman, and she's going to be beautiful all the time. She'll never wrinkle, nothing will ever sag. She will agree with you on everything. She will compliment you and tell you that everything you say is outstanding. She will cook your meals perfectly. There will never be anything burnt. She'll take care of the children so they never bother you. She will love you all the time. She'll never have a headache. Did I leave anything out? Adam said, his eyes got big as saucers. He said, wow. But Adam said, I think there's a catch to this. What's it going to cost me? And God said, well, in order to have this creature, you're going to have to give up the use of an arm and a leg. Adam said, what can I get with a rib? There probably isn't another teaching of Jesus that makes us more nervous than today's gospel about marriage and divorce and so on. I don't have to repeat it. But how come we zero in on this teaching in the church, but we don't zero in on the other teachings? Last Sunday we heard, if your hand is your problem, cut it off. If your foot causes you to sin, cut it off. If your eye is your problem, pull it out. Do we take that literally? No, that doesn't make anybody nervous. This one does. I don't know why, but it does. Probably because it affects us in our humanity so very closely. Now, we want to hold up the ideal of Jesus' teaching, but we also, as I said earlier, we have to apply it to our human condition, because we all know that that is an absolute ideal and many people can't live by it. All other sin is forgivable, so is this one. So let me state right from the beginning that if anybody is divorced, they're not out of the church. I admit that was taught years ago, that if you got divorced, you were out of the church. That was never true. Now, it probably was taught to scare people, but it was never true. Even people in second marriages can be reconciled. What's another one? Oh, limbo. Those of us who are older have heard about limbo, that if a child is not baptized and dies, it goes to limbo. It can't go to heaven. Again, that was another thing that was never church doctrine. It was taught probably to scare people to get their kids baptized. Young people have never heard of limbo. They think it's that dance under the low pole. But just so you know, hear it again. If anybody's divorced, they're not out of the church. And I repeat, even people in second or third marriages can be reconciled. Come and talk to me if that affects any of you. So, what does it take? The gospel says, what God has joined together, no one can separate. Do you honestly believe that every marriage that we witness has God joining these two people together? I don't think so. Even marriages that I have here, I'm no better than anybody else. I think a lot of them do not have God joining them together. They're marrying out of a love for each other, of course. But I don't know if a lot of them have the sense of God being with them. Because God uniting somebody in marriage has nothing to do with the show, the ceremony, the dress, the cake, the reception, whatever. It's what's in a person's heart. Now, today we heard Mark's gospel. Mark's gospel The Christian community has been struggling with this ever since the time of Jesus. Mark's gospel was written about the year 70, and you heard that today. Matthew's gospel was written about 10 years later, and do you know that Matthew, even 10 years after Mark, introduces in his gospel an exception because people couldn't live it. Matthew's gospel, chapter 19, check it out. That what God has that a man and woman are united by God, unless, Matthew says, unless the marriage is unlawful. Interesting. Paul, who wrote, of course, all before this, also made exceptions to marriage. Paul said if a pagan man and woman became Christians, and the man became a Christian, but the woman wouldn't, he could divorce her. It's in there, 1 Corinthians. So here's what we're dealing with. What does it take for a man and woman to be joined by God? In our society, we marry on two levels, civilly and what we call in the church sacramentally, with God. In order for a man and a woman to be married in God, sacramentally, they have to do so freely, without any force, fear, or pressure. They have to intend the marriage until death, no matter what. They have to intend to be faithful. They have to be open to accept children if they come along. Here's the big one. They have to be mature enough to put somebody else ahead of themselves in life. And then they have to know and understand the responsibilities of marriage and be willing to live as a married person, no longer as a single person. If any of those intentions are missing in their hearts, it's a marriage, it's civilly bonded, but it's not a marriage joined by God. That's what we're struggling with today. Now, in our humanity, and I've talked about this so often, there is a hole in our soul. That's just part of being human. We are incomplete by ourselves. And we attempt to fill that hole with other things. If you're especially going through a period of emptiness, what do? We eat a whole bag of potato chips. For a while, it fills up the hole. But then it comes back. Or we drink. Or we use drugs. Or whatever. A lot of people get married thinking that their spouse is going to fill that hole in their soul. And it can't be done. We expect too much of our spouses. They cannot fill up emptiness in us. Now, it happens during the in love period. You know, when you're first in love, the one you love fills up that hole because that. You're not walking on the ground anymore. You're just high with this new feeling of euphoria. But when the honeymoon's over, it goes away. Man just recently told me, when we were in love, my fiance then had this cute little giggle. And he said, now it's driving me nuts. That's what happens. We expect too much. And we are influenced by our society. We live in a me-first society. So many people, after they're married a while, they say, my spouse isn't giving me what I want. Do you hear that? My spouse is not giving me what I want. That's not for marriage. Marriage is what I can give to my spouse. But that goes against everything in society. We're not in a giving society. We're in a getting society. And so in marriage or in any position of life, we have a tendency to focus on the negative. I've said this a couple weeks ago. If you get a letter with 200 words on the page and one is misspelled, you're going to zero in on that one. You're not going to think about the 199 that are spelled correctly. Well, the same in life. We zero in on our problems. We forget about our blessings. So if your marriage is going through a problem, or even in work or so on, don't zero in on the problem. Step back and look at the blessings. And it'll put things back in a good balance. What we forget about in life is that we're always changing. As people say, you're not the woman I married. He's not the man I married. Well, I hope not, because we're changing. Think about the little children making their first communion. They're so cute and little cherubs. And just like that, they become obstinate teenagers. And just like that, they become responsible adults. How did that happen? We're all changing. Are you the same as you were 5 years ago? I don't think so. But when you marry, you're marrying not just the person on the wedding day, but what they will change into. And you're trusting that the love will continue. I ran into this little article a while ago, and I often use it at weddings. A woman writes, "A year and a half ago, Neil and I bought a place in the country. We hadn't been in the market for a house, but our city apartment was only 500 square feet, and we kept admiring this lovely little blue house we drove by every time we visited my parents. It turned out to be shockingly affordable, so now we own a house. We bought furniture, framed pictures, put up a badminton set. We marveled at the change that had come over us. Who were these backyard grilling, property tax paying, shuttlecock batting people that we had become? When we met in our 20s, Neil wasn't a man who would delight in lawn care, and I wasn't a woman who would find such a man appealing. And yet here we were, avidly refilling our bird feeder and talking about all the cardinals. Neil, who hadn't hammered a nail in all the years I've known him, now had opinions on bookshelves, curtains, loved going to the hardware store. He whistled while he mowed the lawn. He was an alien, but I was an alien too. I now knew how to plant bulbs, how to use a crock pot. I was newly armed with CPR, first aid certification, volunteered at a local camp. Our alien selves were remarkably compatible. Several long married people have often said, I've had 3 marriages, but they're with the same person. Marriages has stages. A while ago, I don't know if you ever read the comics, Pearls Before Swine by Stephen Pastis. Check it out, because every once in a while, he's got some good stuff. And I want to show you this, the 6 stages of marriage, and you think about what stage you're in. The 6 stages of marriage, Journal Sentinel, comics. First stage, you're the greatest thing that ever happened to me. Second stage, you're not as great as I thought. Third stage, you need to be changed. Fourth stage, you can't be changed. Fifth stage, I accept you as you are. Sixth stage, you're the greatest thing that ever happened to me. Count your blessings.